The story of Noah and the Great Flood is told in almost every ancient culture on Earth. But what if the version you learned in Sunday school left out the most important part? What if the flood wasn't a punishment from a righteous God? What if it was something far more calculated, far more disturbing? The being I found wandering on my property 3 winters ago told me things that made me question everything I thought I knew about human history, about why the flood really happened, about what existed before the waters came, and about what was deliberately erased from our memory. This isn't about religion. This isn't about faith. This is about a history that was stolen from you, a history of a civilization so advanced, so powerful, that it had to be destroyed, and the survivors had to be made to forget. I warn you now, what you're about to hear will disturb you. It disturbed me, because it explains why humanity has felt lost ever since, why we build and destroy, why we reach for greatness and then tear it down, why something in our collective memory keeps whispering that we've forgotten something essential. The answers are in the story of the flood, the real story, the one that was hidden beneath the myth of an angry God and a righteous man building a boat. If you're ready to learn what really happened before the waters rose, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Because what Harold Jenkins discovered when he sheltered a lost alien in rural Oregon didn't just change his understanding of Noah, it revealed why humanity has been starting over for thousands of years. Now let me tell you how it all began. Harold Jenkins was splitting firewood behind his cabin when the first snow of the season began to fall. At 61, with a bad back and hands that ached in the cold, he should have stopped an hour ago. But there was something about the rhythm of the axe that kept him going. Lift, swing, split. The same motion his father had taught him 50 years ago on this same land. The cabin sat on 40 acres of dense forest in the Cascade foothills of Oregon. No neighbors for miles, no cell service, no internet, just trees, silence, and the occasional elk wandering through the property. Harold had moved out here full-time 3 years ago, after the divorce, after the diagnosis, after everything that had made his old life worth living had fallen apart in the span of 6 months. Lift, swing, split. The snow was coming down heavier now, fat flakes that stuck to his beard and melted on his flannel shirt. He should go inside, start a fire, heat up some soup. But the silence of the cabin was harder to bear than the cold. Harold had been a history teacher for 32 years, high school, ancient civilizations mostly, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome. He had loved standing in front of a classroom, watching young faces light up when they realized that history wasn't just dates and names, it was stories. Human stories that connected the past to the present in ways that made both more meaningful. But the school district had let him go 2 years before he was ready to retire. Budget cuts, they said, nothing personal. Except it felt personal when they kept the younger teachers who could barely locate Sumeria on a map. Then came the diagnosis, prostate cancer. Caught early, the doctors said. Treatable. But something about hearing the word cancer attached to his own body had changed Harold, made him realize how little time might be left, made him question how he had spent the time he'd already had. And then Patricia had left. 34 years of marriage, 2 grown children who lived across the country and called on holidays, a house in the suburbs with a mortgage almost paid off, all of it gone in the span of one conversation. "I don't know who you are anymore, Harold," she had said, sitting across from him at the kitchen table. "And I'm not sure I want to find out." He couldn't blame her. The diagnosis had turned him inward. The job loss had made him angry. He had spent months reading obsessively about ancient flood myths, convinced that there was a connection between the stories that mainstream historians refused to see. Patricia had called it an unhealthy obsession. Maybe she was right. Lift, swing, split. The woodpile was high enough now. Harold buried the axe in the chopping block and gathered an armload of split logs. The snow was falling thick, turning the forest into a white blur. He could barely see 20 feet in front of him. That's when he noticed the tracks. Harold stopped. The logs shifted in his arms. There were footprints in the fresh snow, leading out of the forest, toward his cabin. His first thought was a hiker, someone who had gotten lost in the storm. It happened sometimes, even in the off-season. Inexperienced people who underestimated how quickly the weather could turn in the mountains, but these tracks were wrong. Harold set down the logs and crouched to look closer. The footprints were too long, too narrow. The stride between them was uneven, as if whoever made them was stumbling or injured. He followed the tracks with his eyes. They led around the side of the cabin, toward the old tool shed that Harold used for storage. His heart began to beat faster. He thought about going inside, getting his rifle, calling for help. But there was no one to call out here, no signal, no neighbors, just him and whatever had made those tracks. Harold picked up the axe from the chopping block. The weight of it felt reassuring in his hands. He walked slowly around the side of the cabin, following the tracks through the thickening snow. His breath came out in white clouds. His boots crunched against the frozen ground. The shed door was open. Harold stopped. He always kept that door closed, latched. There were tools inside worth stealing, and even out here, you couldn't be too careful. Someone was inside. "Hello?" Harold called out. His voice sounded strange in the muffled silence of the snowfall. "I don't want any trouble. If you need help, I can help. But you need to come out where I can see you." No response. Just the soft whisper of snow falling through pine branches. Harold gripped the axe tighter. He took a step toward the shed, then another. "I'm armed," he said. It wasn't quite true, but an axe was better than nothing. "Come out now." A sound from inside the shed, a rustling, then a shape appeared in the doorway. Harold's blood turned to ice. The figure was humanoid, standing upright on two legs, but it was too tall, too thin. The proportions were wrong in ways that Harold's brain struggled to process, and the skin, what he could see of it in the dim light, was pale gray, almost silver. The figure took one step forward and then collapsed into the snow. Harold stood frozen, the axe raised, his heart slamming against his ribs. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to get inside, to barricade the door and pretend he hadn't seen what he was seeing. But the figure wasn't moving. It lay crumpled in the snow, one arm extended toward him in what looked almost like a plea. And Harold Jenkins, retired history teacher, cancer survivor, and student of ancient civilizations, made a decision that would change everything he thought he knew about the Great Flood and the world that existed before it. He lowered the axe, and he walked toward the creature in the snow. Up close, the creature was even more impossible. Harold knelt in the snow, the axe still gripped in one hand, and stared at the figure lying before him. The skin was definitely gray, but it had a faint luminescence to it, like moonlight trapped beneath the surface. The limbs were long and slender, almost fragile looking. The head was larger than a human's, smooth, with no visible hair. And there was blood, or something like blood, a dark fluid, almost purple, seeping from a wound on the creature's side. "Jesus Christ," Harold whispered. His breath made clouds in the cold air. "What are you?" The creature's eyes opened. Harold jerked backward, nearly falling. The eyes were enormous, completely black. No whites, no iris, just two dark pools that reflected Harold's own terrified face. He scrambled to his feet, raising the axe. "Stay back, don't move." The creature didn't move. It couldn't. Whatever strength it had used to reach the shed was gone. It lay in the snow, those impossible eyes fixed on Harold, and then a voice appeared inside his head. "Please, I am dying." Harold staggered. The axe slipped from his fingers and fell into the snow. The voice hadn't come through his ears. It had simply appeared in his mind, clear and desperate. "You're in my head," Harold gasped. "How are you in my head?" "I have no other way to speak." The voice was weaker now, fading. "Please, help me. I have traveled very far. I cannot die here, not before I complete my purpose." Harold's heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his temples. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. He was 61 years old, alone in the mountains, and an alien was dying in his backyard. "I should call someone," he said out loud, but there was no one to call, no signal, no neighbors, just him and this impossible creature bleeding into the snow. "If you contact your authorities, they will not help me. They will study me, contain me. The knowledge I carry will be lost forever. Knowledge your species desperately needs." Knowledge about what? About your true history, about what really happened before the Great Flood, about why your civilization has been kept in darkness for thousands of years. Harold felt something shift inside him. The flood. The same subject that had consumed him for months, the same mystery that Patricia had called an unhealthy obsession. And now, a dying creature was promising answers. It could be a trick, a manipulation, a dying predator luring its prey closer. But those eyes, there was no malice in them, just exhaustion, just desperation, just the look of something that had traveled impossibly far and was running out of time. "Can you move?" Harold asked. "If I help you, can you walk?" "I believe so, with assistance." Harold stood there for a long moment, snow falling around him, staring at the wounded creature. Everything he knew about self-preservation told him to walk away. Go inside, lock the door, wait for the thing to die, and then figure out what to do with the body. But Harold Jenkins had spent 32 years teaching history, teaching about civilizations that rose and fell, teaching about knowledge that was lost and found, and here was something offering to fill in the gaps that had haunted him for months. He bent down and carefully lifted the creature's arm over his shoulder. It was lighter than he expected, almost weightless. The skin was cool to the touch, smooth like polished stone. "This is insane," Harold muttered as he half-carried, half-dragged the creature toward the cabin. "This is completely insane." "Thank you, Harold Jenkins." Harold stopped. "How do you know my name?" "I know many things about you. That is why I came here. You are the one who has been asking questions, the one who senses that the story of the flood is incomplete." Harold didn't respond. He just kept moving, dragging the creature through the snow, up the porch steps, and through the front door of the cabin. Inside, the fire he had started that morning was down to embers. Harold lowered the creature onto the couch as gently as he could. The dark blood was still seeping from the wound on its side, staining the old fabric. "You're hurt bad," Harold said. "I don't know how to help you. I don't know anything about your biology. The wound is not as serious as it appears. My species heals differently than yours. I need rest, warmth, time." The creature's eyes closed for a moment, then opened again. "And I need to tell you what I came here to say, before it is too late." Harold grabbed a blanket from the bedroom and draped it over the creature. The absurdity of the moment struck him. He was tucking in an alien like a sick child. "You said you came here specifically," Harold said, settling into the chair across from the couch. "To me. Why?" "Because you have been searching for the truth about the flood. Your thoughts have been reaching outward into frequencies you do not understand. I intercepted them. I followed them here." "My thoughts?" "When a consciousness asks questions with genuine intensity, those questions radiate beyond the physical. Most beings do not hear them. But I was listening. I have been listening to your world for a very long time." Harold leaned forward. "How long?" The creature's eyes seemed to pulse with a faint inner light. "I was there. Harold Jenkins, I was there before the flood. I watched your world transform from paradise to catastrophe. And I watched the survivors forget everything they had been." Harold felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. "That's impossible. The flood was thousands of years ago. No living thing could. Time does not work the same for my species. We live on scales that your biology cannot comprehend. I am old, Harold. Very old. Old enough to remember what your world looked like before the waters came. Old enough to know why it had to be destroyed." The fire crackled. Snow continued to fall outside the windows. Harold sat in silence, staring at this impossible creature claiming to have witnessed the most catastrophic event in human mythology. "Why?" he finally asked. "Why did it have to be destroyed?" "Because humanity was becoming too powerful." The creature's voice in his mind carried a weight of sorrow that made Harold's chest ache. "You were remembering what you truly were, accessing capabilities that threatened those who controlled you. The flood was not divine punishment, Harold. It was an extermination, a reset, and the story you were taught afterward was designed to make sure you never understood what was really taken from you." Harold's hands were trembling. He pressed them against his knees to stop the shaking. "Tell me," he said. "Tell me everything." The creature's eyes held his gaze. "Are you certain you want to know? The truth about the pre-flood world is not comforting. It will change how you understand human history, how you understand yourself." Harold thought about all the questions that had consumed him, the flood myths that appeared in every ancient culture, the impossible structures built by supposedly primitive peoples, the legends of giants and gods in a golden age lost to time. "I've spent my whole life studying history," Harold said, "and I always knew something was missing, something big. If you have the answers, I need to hear them, whatever they are." The creature seemed to relax slightly. The tension in its strange form eased. "Very well, Harold Jenkins. I will show you what the world looked like before the flood, and I will tell you why it was erased from human memory." The creature raised one slender hand. The air in the cabin began to shimmer. And Harold Jenkins, retired history teacher and seeker of lost truths, was about to see the world that existed before everything was washed away. The cabin dissolved around him. Harold gasped as his living room disappeared and was replaced by something impossible. He was standing on a terrace of white stone, overlooking a city that stretched to the horizon. Towers rose into a sky that seemed bluer than any sky he had ever seen. Gardens hung from structures that defied gravity. And moving through the streets below were people, thousands of them. "Where am I?" Harold spun around, searching for the creature. "What is this?" "You are still in your cabin." The voice came from everywhere. "This is a projection, a memory I am sharing with you. What you see is Earth as it existed, approximately 12,000 years before your current calendar." Harold walked to the edge of the terrace. His hands gripped the stone railing. It felt real, solid, warm from the sun. Below him, the city pulsed with life, but something was wrong. The people moving through the streets were not uniform. Some were normal human height. Others were massive, 8 feet tall, 10 feet, giants walking among ordinary men and women. "The Nephilim," Harold whispered. "They were real." "That is one name for them. The creatures produced when my kind interbred with your species. The hybrids who possessed capabilities far beyond ordinary humans." Harold watched a giant walk past a group of smaller humans. There was no fear in the interaction, no submission. They moved together like equals. "I don't understand. The Bible says the Nephilim were wicked, that they corrupted the earth, that God sent the flood to destroy them." "The Bible says what the survivors were told to believe." The voice carried that same weight of sorrow Harold had felt before. "The truth is different. The Nephilim were not wicked. They were teachers. They shared knowledge with humanity that accelerated your development by thousands of years." The scene shifted. Harold found himself inside a vast chamber filled with technology he couldn't comprehend. Crystals the size of cars pulsed with inner light. Screens displayed information and symbols he had never seen. And humans, ordinary humans, worked alongside the giants, operating equipment that seemed to respond to thought rather than touch. "This is impossible," Harold said. "Humans 12,000 years ago were primitive, hunter-gatherers. They didn't have technology like this." "That is what you were taught. That is the story that was implanted after the flood. But look at what humans actually achieved when they had access to real knowledge." The vision expanded. Harold saw structures being built, not with cranes and scaffolding, but with focused beams of light that lifted massive stones as if they weighed nothing. He saw healing chambers where the sick were restored to health in hours. He saw craft that moved through the sky without wings or engines. "The ancient structures," Harold breathed, "the pyramids, Göbekli Tepe, Puma Punku, they weren't built by primitive people using copper tools. They were remnants, echoes of what existed before. The flood destroyed almost everything, but some structures were too massive to be completely erased. Your archaeologists find them and cannot explain them because they are working from a false timeline, a timeline designed to hide what humanity once was." Harold turned in a slow circle, trying to absorb everything he was seeing. The pre-flood world was not primitive. It was advanced beyond anything his modern civilization had achieved. "Why?" he asked. "Why would anyone want to destroy this? Why would anyone want humanity to forget?" "Because you were becoming too powerful." The vision shifted again. Now Harold stood in what looked like a council chamber. Beings like the creature in his cabin sat in a circle, arguing. Their telepathic communications overlapped, creating a cacophony of voices in his mind. "My species was divided," the creature explained. "Some of us believed that humanity deserved to evolve freely, that sharing knowledge with your kind was our sacred duty. Others believed that you were developing too quickly, that you were becoming a threat." "A threat to whom?" to the control systems that had governed Earth for millennia. You must understand, Harold, your planet was not a natural development. It was a project, a managed experiment. Humanity was created to serve specific purposes, and those purposes did not include becoming equal to those who created you. Harold felt a chill despite the warmth of the projected sun. We were slaves. You were a workforce, created through genetic modification of existing primates, designed to mine resources, to build structures, to serve the needs of beings you were taught to worship as gods. But the experiment went wrong, or right, depending on perspective. The scene shifted to show humans and Nephilim working together, learning together. The giants taught the humans how to access dormant capabilities in their own minds, how to manipulate energy, how to heal, how to communicate telepathically, how to remember past lives and access knowledge from the previous incarnations. Humanity was awakening. Every generation, more of you accessed abilities that were supposed to remain dormant. The genetic limiters we had installed were failing, and the Nephilim, the hybrids who loved both their human mothers and their celestial fathers, accelerated the process. So the flood wasn't punishment for wickedness, Harold said slowly. It was population control, extermination of a species that was getting too smart. The voice in his mind was heavy with grief. Yes. The vision changed again. Harold now stood on a different terrace, looking out at the same beautiful city. But the sky was different. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, and in the streets below there was chaos. People running, screaming, giants trying to organize evacuations. We knew it was coming. Some of us tried to warn them, tried to help them prepare, but the faction that wanted the reset had technology far beyond what the Nephilim possessed. They could manipulate weather systems, tectonic plates. They could call down destruction on a global scale and make it look like natural catastrophe. Harold watched as the first waves appeared on the horizon. Walls of water, hundreds of feet high, moving faster than anything should be able to move. Noah, Harold said. Was Noah real? The one you call Noah was real, but he was not chosen by a loving God to preserve the righteous. He was selected by the faction that ordered the flood, selected because his genetics were pure, uncontaminated by Nephilim DNA. He and his family were preserved specifically to restart humanity without the hybrid bloodlines that had caused so much trouble. The waves hit the city. Harold watched towers crumble, watched gardens torn from their impossible perches, watched giants trying to shield smaller humans with their massive bodies as the water swept everything away. He felt tears on his cheeks. Even though it was just a projection, even though it had happened 12,000 years ago, the horror was overwhelming. How many died? The voice was quiet. Billions. The pre-flood world had a population larger than your current civilization. Almost all of it was erased in a matter of days. The vision showed the aftermath, a world of mud and debris, scattered survivors clinging to mountaintops, the massive structures reduced to rubble, and above it all, craft moving through the sky, surveying the destruction. The faction that ordered the flood was thorough. They didn't just destroy the civilization, they erased the memory of it. Survivors were gathered, their minds were wiped, new stories were implanted, stories of a wicked world that deserved destruction, stories of a righteous man chosen by God, stories that placed the blame on humanity rather than on those who committed the genocide. The Bible, Harold said, all the flood myths, they're not records, they're programming. They are simplified versions designed to teach specific lessons, that humans are sinful, that they deserve punishment, that they should be grateful for salvation from an angry God. These stories ensure that humanity never questions what was really done to them, never tries to recover what was lost. The vision faded. Harold found himself back in his cabin, sitting in the chair across from the creature. The fire had burned down to coals. Hours must have passed, though it had felt like minutes. Harold wiped his face with trembling hands. Why are you telling me this? Why now, after thousands of years? Because the cycle is repeating. The creature's eyes seem to glow brighter. Humanity is beginning to awaken again. Despite everything that was done to suppress you, your species is once again accessing capabilities that were supposed to remain dormant, and there are those who are discussing another reset. Harold felt his blood run cold. Another flood? Not a flood. The voice was grim. Your species has spread too far for that to be effective. But there are other methods. Pandemic, war, climate catastrophe, economic collapse, any crisis that reduces population and disrupts the development of collective consciousness. COVID, Harold said quietly, the wars, the political chaos, is that? I cannot say with certainty, but the patterns are familiar. When humanity approaches critical mass of awakening, disruptions occur, sometimes natural, sometimes engineered. The goal is always the same: reset, forget, start over. Harold stood up abruptly. He walked to the window. The snow had stopped. Stars were visible through breaks in the clouds. Why me? He asked without turning around. Why tell a retired history teacher in the mountains of Oregon? I can't stop a global reset. I can't even stop my ex-wife from thinking I'm crazy. You cannot stop anything by force, but you can help others remember. The creature's voice was gentle now, almost tender. Every human who understands the truth becomes harder to control. Every mind that awakens contributes to a collective shift that makes resets less effective. You asked why the flood myths are in every culture. It is because the memory persists. Despite everything that was done to erase it, some part of humanity remembers. That memory is your greatest weapon. Harold turned to face the creature. What happened to the Nephilim? Did they all die in the flood? Most did, but some survived. Some were protected by members of my species who disagreed with the extermination. They went into hiding. They interbred with the surviving human population. Their bloodlines persist to this day, diluted but present. Where? Everywhere. The creature's eyes seem to hold infinite depth. Every culture has legends of exceptional humans, prophets, healers, leaders who seem to possess capabilities beyond the ordinary. Many of them carry Nephilim genetics. The abilities are dormant in most, but they can be activated. Harold thought about his own life, his intuitions that had always seemed sharper than other people's, the moments when he knew things he shouldn't know, the obsessive pull toward ancient history, toward flood myths, toward questions that most people never thought to ask. He started, but couldn't finish the question. You carry markers consistent with hybrid ancestry. It is one reason your questions reached me across such vast distances. Your consciousness broadcasts on frequencies that most humans cannot access. Harold sat back down heavily. His entire understanding of himself was shifting. He wasn't just a history teacher who had lost his job and his wife. He was a descendant of beings who had been systematically exterminated to prevent humanity from evolving. What am I supposed to do with this? He asked. I'm 61 years old. I live alone in the woods. I talk to no one. You right. The creature's response was immediate. You have spent months researching flood myths. You have made connections that other scholars have missed. Now you understand the framework that ties all of it together. Write what you know. Share it with those who are ready to hear. No one will believe me. Some will not. Others will feel the truth of it in their bones. Remember, Harold, the memory persists. Every human carries fragments of the pre-flood world in their collective unconscious. When they encounter the truth, something inside them recognizes it. Not everyone will accept it consciously, but seeds will be planted, and seeds grow. Harold was silent for a long moment. Outside, the first light of dawn was beginning to show on the horizon. He had been in that vision for the entire night. You said you were dying, Harold said finally. When I found you, you said you were dying. My physical form is damaged beyond recovery. The creature's voice carried acceptance rather than fear. I will not survive more than a few of your days, but that is acceptable. I have completed my purpose. The knowledge I carried has been transferred. You will carry it forward. Wait. Harold leaned forward. You came all this way to this specific place, knowing you would die here? I came because you were ready, because your questions called out across frequencies that I was monitoring, because the knowledge needed a new vessel, and you are capable of carrying it. The creature's eyes closed briefly, then opened again. There is more I must show you, about the genetic keys that unlock dormant human potential, about the techniques the Nephilim used to awaken capabilities in ordinary people, about what you personally can access if you choose to develop it. Harold felt something stir inside him, a mix of fear and excitement. Show me." The creature raised its hand again, but this time, instead of projecting a vision, it placed its palm against Harold's forehead. The touch was electric. Harold felt energy surge through his skull, down his spine, into every cell of his body. Images flooded his mind, not visions of the past, but instructions, techniques, knowledge encoded directly into his consciousness. He saw how breath could be used to access altered states, how focused intention could influence physical matter, how the pineal gland, calcified and dormant in most modern humans, could be reactivated, how memories from past lives could be accessed through specific meditation practices, how telepathic communication worked, and how any human could develop it with training. The download lasted only seconds, but it felt like years of learning compressed into a single moment. When the creature removed his hand, Harold gasped. He felt different, expanded, as if doors in his mind that had been locked his entire life had suddenly swung open. "What did you do to me?" "I gave you the tools." The creature's voice was weaker now. The effort of the transfer had cost it. The same tools the Nephilim used to awaken humans before the flood. The same knowledge that was erased from your species' memory. Use them. Teach others. Help humanity remember what it truly is. Harold looked at his hands. They looked the same, but he could feel energy moving through them, a tingling warmth that pulsed with his heartbeat. "I can feel it," he whispered. "I can actually feel it. That is your life force, your chi, your prana. It has always been there. You simply couldn't perceive it before. Now you can, and with practice you can learn to direct it, to heal, to influence, to create." Harold stood up slowly. The room looked different. He could see faint patterns of light around objects, around the creature, a web of energy connecting everything. This is what humans could do before the flood. This is what humans are designed to do. The capabilities were built into your genetics. They were simply switched off. What you are experiencing now is your natural state, the state that was suppressed for 12,000 years. Harold walked around the room, marveling at the new perceptions. He could feel the life force of the trees outside, the residual energy of animals that had passed through the property, even the faint traces of his own past emotions, imprinted on objects he had touched repeatedly over the years. "This changes everything," he said. "Yes." The creature's voice was barely a whisper now. That is the point. When enough humans remember what they are, the control systems fail. That is why the flood was ordered. That is why resets keep happening. And that is why those of us who believe in your potential keep finding ways to remind you. Harold turned back to the creature. It looked weaker. The luminescence of its skin was fading. "You're dying," Harold said. "Yes, but I am not afraid. Consciousness does not end with the body. I will continue in other forms, other dimensions. This is another truth that was hidden from humanity. Death is not an ending. It is a transition. The fear of death is another control mechanism, another way to keep you small and compliant." Harold knelt beside the couch. "Is there anything I can do? Any way to help you?" "You are helping by listening, by receiving what I came to give, by committing to share it with others." The creature's hand moved weakly, touching Harold's arm. "That is all any of us can do. Pass the light forward. Trust that it will continue to spread even after we are gone." Harold felt tears again, for a creature he had known less than a day, for a connection that felt older than his current lifetime. "Thank you," he said, "for finding me, for trusting me with this. Thank you for opening your door." The creature's eyes closed. Many would have run. Many would have called authorities. You chose compassion. That choice is why you were ready. The creature's breathing slowed. The faint glow of its skin continued to dim. "Rest," Harold said softly. "I'll stay with you." And he did. He sat beside the creature through the morning and into the afternoon, holding its cool hand, feeling its life force gradually fade. When the being finally passed, there was no dramatic moment, just a quiet release, an exhale that didn't have an inhale after it, and then stillness. Harold sat in silence for a long time. The body on his couch would need to be dealt with. There would be practical matters to attend to, but for now, he just sat with the weight of everything he had learned. The world before the flood, the genocide disguised as divine punishment, the Nephilim who had loved humanity enough to share forbidden knowledge, the memory that persisted despite everything done to erase it, and now, the capabilities awakening in his own body. He looked at his hands again, flexed his fingers, felt the energy respond. Harold Jenkins had started this day as a broken man hiding from the world. He would not end it that way. Harold buried the creature beneath the oldest oak on his property. He dug the grave himself, despite his bad back, despite the frozen ground. It took most of the night, but it felt right. Sacred, even. He didn't mark the grave, no stone, no cross, just the tree standing sentinel over a being who had traveled across the stars to deliver a message, and had given its life in the process. The first weeks after the encounter were disorienting. Harold would wake in the middle of the night, unsure if any of it had really happened. Then he would feel the energy moving through his body, see the faint glow around objects in the dark room, and know that it was real. He practiced the techniques that had been downloaded into his consciousness, breathing exercises that seemed simple but produced profound shifts in awareness, meditation practices that allowed him to access states of consciousness he had never imagined possible, visualization methods that let him direct the energy he could now feel flowing through his body. The first time he healed something, it was an accident. A squirrel had been injured near the woodpile, a hawk attack from the look of the wounds. Harold found it struggling in the snow, barely alive. Without thinking, he picked it up and held it in his hands, feeling compassion for the small creature. The energy moved on its own. He felt it flow from his chest, down his arms, into his palms. The squirrel twitched, its breathing steadied, and Harold watched as the wounds began to close. 3 minutes later, the animal leaped from his hands and scurried up the nearest tree. Harold stood in the snow, staring at his palms. "My God," he whispered, "it's real. It's all real." He began documenting everything. His old research on flood myths took on new dimensions now that he understood the framework behind them. He cross-referenced ancient texts with the visions the creature had shown him. He found correlations everywhere. The Sumerian accounts of the Anunnaki, the Book of Enoch's descriptions of the Watchers, the Greek legends of Titans, Hindu stories of the Asuras. Every culture preserved fragments of the same suppressed history. 2 months after the creature's death, Harold drove into town for supplies. It was the first time he had left the property since the encounter. Everything looked different. He could see the energy around people, bright around some, dim and muddy around others. He could feel their emotions without trying. The cashier at the grocery store was grieving a recent loss. The man pumping gas was consumed by financial anxiety. A child in the parking lot radiated pure joy that felt like sunlight against Harold's expanded senses. It was overwhelming. He finished his errands as quickly as possible and retreated back to the mountains, but the world wouldn't leave him alone. Patricia called 3 months after the encounter, the first time they had spoken since the divorce was finalized. "Harold, I've been having strange dreams," she said. Her voice was different, uncertain, not the confident woman who had walked away from their marriage. Dreams about floods, about giants, about you, standing in some kind of ancient city. I don't understand what's happening to me. Harold gripped the phone tighter. The creature had said that sharing knowledge could awaken dormant memories in others, that the truth resonated with something buried in the collective unconscious. "Patricia, I need to tell you something that's going to sound insane. I've been feeling like I'm going insane for weeks. Whatever you have to say can't be worse," Harold told her. "Not everything, but enough. The creature, the visions, the truth about the flood, the capabilities that humans had been designed to access but had been prevented from developing." The line was silent for a long time when he finished. "I believe you," Patricia finally said. "I don't know why, but something in me knows you're telling the truth. That's what scares me." She drove up to the cabin a week later. Harold met her on the porch, unsure what to expect. The woman who stepped out of the car looked older than he remembered, tired, but there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a searching quality, a hunger for understanding. "Show me," she said. "Whatever you can do now, show me." Harold placed his hands over a wilting houseplant she had brought. He focused his intention. Let the energy flow. Patricia watched as the leaves straightened, as color returned to the stems, as new growth emerged from the soil. "How?" she breathed. "We were designed for this, all of us. It was just switched off." He taught her the breathing techniques, the meditation practices, the visualization methods. Patricia learned quickly, as if her consciousness had been waiting for this knowledge, preparing for it without knowing why. Within a month, she could feel the energy too. Word spread. Harold never advertised, never promoted himself, but people found their way to the cabin. A nurse from Portland who had been having visions of ancient catastrophe, a teenager from Seattle whose parents thought he was mentally ill because he could feel other people's emotions, a retired engineer who had become obsessed with megalithic structures and couldn't explain why. Harold taught them all, not as a guru or a master, just as someone slightly further along the path, sharing what he had learned. "We're not special," he would tell each of them. "We're just remembering. What we can do is what all humans are supposed to be able to do. The only difference is that we've started waking up." 6 months after the encounter, Harold sat on his porch watching the sunset. Patricia was inside, preparing dinner. 3 students were staying in tents on the property, integrating the techniques they had learned. He felt a familiar presence. Not the creature. That consciousness had moved on, but something connected to it. A warmth in his chest that seemed to come from beyond the physical world. The knowledge is spreading. The thought appeared in his mind, clear but gentle. "You have done well." Harold smiled. "I'm just passing the light forward, like I was asked. That is all any of us can do, and it is enough. Remember, Harold, the flood erased a civilization, but it could not erase the potential encoded in human genetics. Every person who awakens makes the next awakening easier. Critical mass is approaching. Will there be another reset? Another attempt to stop it? There will be attempts. There always are. But humanity is more connected now than before the flood. Information spreads too quickly to be fully suppressed. And there are many of us, on many dimensions, working to support your awakening. You are not alone in this." Harold looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, civilizations watched. Some wanted humanity to remain asleep. Others were working to help them remember. "Thank you," Harold said quietly, "for everything." The warmth in his chest pulsed gently, then faded. But Harold knew it wasn't gone, just waiting, available whenever he needed guidance. Patricia came out onto the porch and sat beside him. "You're talking to them again, aren't you?" she asked. "Just listening, mostly." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I spent 34 years married to you, and I never really knew you. Now I feel like I'm finally meeting the person you were always supposed to be." Harold put his arm around her. "Maybe we're both becoming who we were always supposed to be." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars multiply across the sky. Harold thought about the creature buried beneath the oak tree, about the visions of the world before the flood, about the billions who had died, so that humanity could be kept ignorant of its own potential. He couldn't bring them back. He couldn't undo 12,000 years of suppression. But he could teach. He could share. He could help others remember. And that, as the creature had said, was enough. The pre-flood world had been destroyed because humanity was becoming too powerful. Now humanity was waking up again, and this time they wouldn't forget. Harold Jenkins spent his career teaching ancient history to students who would forget most of it by the following semester. Now he teaches something that cannot be forgotten, because it was never really learned. It was remembered. The story of the Great Flood exists in every ancient culture for a reason, not because early humans all imagined the same catastrophe independently, but because they all survived the same extermination. And despite everything done to erase that memory, something in our collective consciousness refuses to let it go. You felt it while listening to this story. That strange recognition, that sense that pieces were falling into place that you didn't even know were scattered. That feeling is your inheritance, the genetic memory of a world that existed before everything was washed away, a world where humans accessed capabilities that we've been taught to believe are impossible. The flood destroyed that civilization. But it couldn't destroy the potential encoded in your DNA. What if the abilities Harold awakened are not special gifts given to a chosen few? What if they are standard features that were simply switched off? What if the guilt, the limitation, the sense that you are small and powerless are not natural human conditions, but installed programs designed to keep you from remembering what you really are. The pre-flood world fell because humanity was becoming too powerful to control. Right now, all over the planet, people are waking up, accessing abilities, questioning narratives, feeling the stirring of something ancient that refuses to stay buried. You are part of that awakening. You wouldn't have listened this far if you weren't. The only question is what you will do next. If this story awakened something in you, leave a comment. Share what you felt. Share what you remembered, because every person who speaks their truth makes it easier for others to speak theirs. And if you want more stories like this, stories that reveal what was hidden, stories that challenge the narratives designed to keep you small, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. The flood erased a world, but it could not erase the truth. And the truth is rising again, one awakening at a time.